Alright everybody, welcome back! A new patch is almost here, and with that we have a new leak list. Most of the new planes that are on it, like the Hornet and the SE-30SM, I've already covered, so I figured it's a perfect time to take a look at the F-2, also known as the Viper Zero. This will be a small one since there isn't really much of a family to speak of. Now I do want to say on the leak list they said this may be delayed. We'll probably know actually later today if it's coming or not. But even if it doesn't, it's almost certainly coming at some point in this year, so I figure we may as well go ahead and cover it now. Normally I don't cover prototypes in these videos, I only look at the in-service ones, but I'm going to make a bit of an exception for the XF2A because Japan has much fewer options for high-tier planes than the other nations I've covered so far, so it's much more likely to be added. I still won't spend a ton of time on it though. The F-2 program was derived from the F-16, but it does have some quite substantial differences since it was to be replacing the F-1 in the anti-shipping role. Because of this, one of the changes from the normal F-16 is the ability to carry 4 Japanese anti-ship missiles, either the ASM-1 or ASM-2. Now, there is a very real possibility that Gaijin adds neither of these, as their record is very hit or miss when it comes to anti-ship missiles. However, if they did, the ASM-1 has an active radar seeker and thus would likely come similar to the missiles on the Event Tornado, where they can be used in Sim-EC but fail to track tanks. The ASM-2 is a bit more tricky, as it uses an IR seeker that is designed to target ships and isn't confirmed to be able to target ground units. However, there is a chance that Gaijin does something similar to the Penguin missile and lets it lock tanks anyways. This missile has extremely long range at over 150 kilometers, though in-game it will be limited to 20 in ground RB, as you can't target anything beyond a point on the map over that distance. Another requirement was the ability to use 4 medium-range air-to-air missiles, and on the XF2A this would be 4 AIM-7Ms, at least while they are prototyping for the F2. The JAPG-1 is unable to guide active radar homing missiles. Remember that for later. Speaking of the JAPG-1, this is an AESA radar, technically the first operational in a fighter when the F2 would later come into service in 2000. And the XF2 wasn't quite full strength yet, there being some issues with the nose that seriously impacted both range and strength. It's still an AESA radar, and in-game that would mean it'd have both incredibly fast updates for targets while in TWS and very good notch resistance as well. Along with those 4 radar missiles, the outer 4 pylons can also carry IR missiles, either the AIM-9L or the AAM-3. This gives a total of 8 air-to-air missiles, equal to the F-15 and 2 more than a normal F-16. The XF2A would likely make a great Rank 8 premium for Japan, around the same BR or slightly higher as the F-15J, as even with an AESA radar, it still has sparrows. It doesn't matter how good the radar is if the missiles are easy to defeat. There is one other note for the XF2. The airframes have been continuously upgraded for testing throughout the years with better radars, IRST systems, all the new missiles and bombs installed to name a few. There was always the possibility of a version with some or all of those later testing options, for example as perhaps a high-tier event vehicle if they decide to go down another route for the premium. Up next we have the early production F2A and the twin-seat F2B by extension. Basically everything I mentioned for the prototype is the same with the early F2. It has the same JAPG-1 radar, which limits its radar missile capability, the same anti-ship missiles, and the same IR missiles. It can technically use the AAM-4, but only in terminal mode, meaning that only within 16 kilometers. Not exactly the greatest, and it almost certainly wouldn't come like that in War Thunder. The big change was the addition of new guided munitions in the form of JDAM and GCS-1 bombs. The problem is that neither of the guided options would likely come to it in-game. The JDAM could be carried, yes, but at this stage the target needed to be designated before the plane took off, meaning Gaijin likely won't give it the JDAM in-game. It could also carry laser JDAMs, but it had no pod to actually, mark a target with a laser. So again, it would not be able to get them in-game. The other thing is the GCS-1, which is an infrared guided weapon, but this is already rejected by Gaijin as it can't target tanks. This means that in all likelihood, all the F2A early would be in-game is an XF2A with a stronger radar, and potentially also the JAAQ-2 IRST. This comes in a pod, and it could make a nice combination with the RAM coding to reduce the RCS signature, when Gaijin decides to start modeling radar reduction for planes other than the F-117. If Gaijin decides they don't care about radar strength, this could also easily be a premium, as we are well past the point where an early F-2 should have been added. Planes like the Eurofighter and Rafale easily beat it in terms of overall flight performance and obviously kit. Speaking of, I think it's a great time to talk about the flight performance of the F-2. It is basically a big F-16, but it has substantial differences that heavily impact its flight performance. Some probably won't be a big deal in War Thunder, like it does have a different flight computer than the normal F-16, which is supposed to help it with energy retention, but the big thing is going to be the wing in War Thunder. It has much more wing area, about 25% more area. Even though it is larger, the plane extensively uses composites, meaning that it only weighs about 6% more than the F-16C Block 50. This means that you have both a lower wing loading and more overall lift, giving the F-2 better dogfight performance than the F-16C. I have a feeling the Block 10 will likely still beat it in game, but that remains to be seen. The other difference, though this is more unclear, is that the intake design was probably changed as well, meaning that even though the engine has the same thrust outside the aircraft as a Block 50, it could potentially have lower channel loss and thus more thrust when actually inside the plane. If Gaijin does decide to do this, then quite possibly even that small difference in thrust to weight would be gone. What I said so far may sound great, but changing the wing design did come with some pretty major side effects. More lift inevitably means more drag, and with also changing the sweep of the wings, this reduced the top speed of the plane to only Mach 1.1 on the deck and Mach 2 at altitude. Essentially, you trade speed for turn. This is slower than pretty much every other top tier, especially on the deck. For what it's worth though, it is still faster than the Super Hornet that was leaked, so I mean, hey. Finally, we come to the late F-2A, which is the variant which I expect us to see soon, likely this update assuming that leak is correct. This has the improved JAPG-2 radar, which increases range but also crucially supports the AAM-4. Since the plane can now talk to the missile off the rail as well, the IRST can actually guide the AAM-4 in as well, just like with the Rafale and Eurofighter. Active radar homing missiles are vital at top tier, and I don't see them adding a version of the F-2 that can't use them. The AAM-4 is of course already seen on the F-15J-M in-game, and at the moment is essentially a slightly better AMRAAM, with better agility off the rail and rough with the same range. This will likely change over time as the AAM-4 is supposed to be equivalent to the AMRAAM C5, and there are several bug reports open for it. The layout we can expect to see on launch is the 4 AAM-4s and 4 AAM-3. Though as time goes on, the AAM-4B and AAM-5 will likely be added as well. The 4B has both improved range and a brand new seeker, an AESA radar itself, one of the only missiles to feature one at this moment. The AAM-5 on the other hand is an extremely advanced IR missile, something in the same class as stuff like the IRIS-T and AIM-9X, featuring both thrust vectoring and an imaging infrared seeker for extremely high flare resistance. Unfortunately, unlike those two, I couldn't seem to find any solid G stats, but I would expect it to be at least 60 Gs and quite possibly even higher. The high flare resistance is the major issue with it, and the reason that better IR missiles haven't come yet, which I totally agree with. It has lock-on after launch, lofting, and everything else you expect from a modern IR missile. The AAM-5B is also supported, but the only thing I could find is that it had improved IRCCM over the original, along with being compatible with JHMCS for the F-15. Remember, that's the F-15 HMD, and we'll get back to that here in a second. Another big thing, at least for War Thunder, is the addition of a TGP, in this case Sniper, and the ability to designate GPS targets mid-flight. These two additions mean that it would get normal JDAMs, which you could actually go ahead and do the target on, but it would also get the laser JDAM currently found in the German Tornado, giving Japan another desperately needed cast option for a top tier. In terms of the anti-ship missiles, it maintains the original loads, but now gets the ASM-2B as well. This adds GPS to the missile, and so it'd be kind of like the AASM in-game, where it has IR but GPS backup. It also gained the ASM-3 and 3A, which are both extremely long-range anti-ship missiles with radar homing, so another one like the ASM-1, which I kind of doubt that we actually get in War Thunder. These have between 200 to 400 kilometers of range depending on the version. There is also an extremely new anti-ship missile in testing known as the Type 12 SSM-ER, with potentially over 1,000 kilometers of range from an aircraft. Obviously this will never come to War Thunder, but it is still pretty amazing. The final thing is a major flaw with the plane. Currently, it has no HMD. Japan evidently decided against implementing JHMCS like they did on the F-15 and favor developing an indigenous design, and then just haven't developed one. There's also no evidence that they even tested other HMD systems on it. There's two routes guys could go here. Either full historical accuracy, so no HMD, or balance, in which case they could simply give it HMD for the sake of gameplay. Personally, I hope it's the latter, as there is clear evidence showing that it was planned, they just simply haven't done it yet. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if y'all are looking forward to the F-2 in the comments down below, and I'll catch y'all next time. So, peace, y'all.